Major spoilers for Trails of Cold Steel 3, incidental or minor spoilers for Trails in the Sky and Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2. I will be refraining from cross-spell spoilers as much as possible, but there may be a few that slip through. This is Trails, of course, so avoiding spoilers when talking about the newest game is going to be difficult, and even seeing footage may serve as a spoiler. Now that you're prepared, it's time to dive right back in. This is a big one, folks. For those of you who have played through all 8 games prior to Cold Steel 4, you know that Falcom has been building this series up for a potentially epic 60% mark. The last game of the Cold Steel arc, the largest arc in the Trails series so far, with the largest cast including many returning favorites, is going to be a huge game for what the series hopes to achieve. Coming off arguably the biggest cliffhanger in series history from Cold Steel 3, and that's not a sentence I say lightly, I don't know how I could not be excited about this game. Trails game releases are always cause for giddiness and anticipation, and Cold Steel 4 is not skimping on that excitement, offering teases of anticipated character meetings and reunions and the promise of a satisfying conclusion to the grand conflict in Erebonia. If you're for some reason watching this video without knowing the full history of the game, I'll do a brief rundown now. Trails of Cold Steel 4 is a JRPG developed by Nihon Falcom. It marks the 4th game in the Erebonian arc of the interconnected story and world that is the Trails series. Trails of Cold Steel 4 has been called by some in the fan community the Avengers of the Trails series due to the uniting of many different characters from not just the Erebonian arc, but also from the first arc of Liberl and second arc of Crossbell. The game came out for the PS4 in Japan in September of 2018 and will be coming out in the West on the PS4 on October 27th, 2020, with Switch and PC ports scheduled for 2021. The localization is courtesy of NIS America, the company that took over localizing the series from Xseed starting with Trails of Cold Steel 3. Trails of Cold Steel 4 continues the adventures of Rean Schwarzer, an instructor at Thor's Military Branch Academy, and his students in Class 7. Well, their adventures and those of the former Class 7 that Rean had been a part of, plus their allies, plus many of the main cast from Trails in the Sky and the Crossbell duology. There's just a whole heaping of characters, some of whom haven't been seen in the series since their arc ended, so it'll be nice to see them again. However, before happy reunions can happen, the devastation of the end of Cold Steel 3 must be dealt with. Milliam died in her efforts to protect Rean and Altina, and Rean lost control of his ogre powers, resulting in him bringing about the curse of Erebonia. Exactly as Chancellor Osborne and many of the other antagonists, including long-running evildoers Ouroboros, wished for. In addition to this, Rean and his divine knight Valimar have been captured and imprisoned by the Chancellor. If that wasn't enough, the Courageous was blown up by the Chancellor's allies the Gnomes, while Toval, Victor Arcade, and Prince Olivert were aboard. All this as background details to the growing likelihood of armed conflict starting between the 2 biggest nations on the continent, the Erebonian Empire and the Calvard Republic. It's a very low point for the good guys, but if you think that's going to stop them, you don't know the Trails series. The new Class 7, led by Una Crawford, start a desperate mission to find out what the Chancellor's plans are, while also working to find and rescue Rean. Of course, they're not alone, receiving help from the familiar old Class 7. Oh, and with Ouroboros still around playing their games, it's time to bring back some big guns to help take care of all of them. Well, we'll have to play the game to find out if they succeed, and I am all here for this likely chaotic and also likely fun finale to the Cold Steel games. The story and the characters are obviously the biggest draws for me when it comes to this game. I really want to see how the development of the new Class 7 finishes, and I hope that in the chaos of all these characters coming together, we can get some shining moments with old friends. That includes our old Class 7 friends, the special support section from Crossbell, and the bracers and allies from Liberl, and any other characters we've picked up along the way. Cold Steel 4 has a chance for some epic interactions that I can't wait to see, along with my highly awaited reunion with some of my favorite video game characters of all time. That's not even going into the return of several antagonists who haven't been seen since their Sky or Crossbell introductions. Whether a game with a cast this huge can do justice to all of them certainly can be debated, but it doesn't diminish my hope that there will be a lot of good times to be had. Most Trails games have a lot of setup and world building that happens within them. One of the things that I'm excited about for Cold Steel 4 is for all that build up to shine through. Given the events at the end of Cold Steel 3, I doubt 4 is going to be a slow burn relative to a lot of the Trails games, and that gives 4 a chance to have a really dynamic narrative from the start. Sure, they are likely to set up some details, but it's not going to be the main focus. This is the end of the Cold Steel saga, so it's time for stuff to come to a head. The next game in the series, Hajimari no Kiseki, is likely going to start this setting up process again like its spiritual predecessor, Trails the Third, and that means Cold Steel 4 can spend more time on the big story moments that they've been building up through many hours of gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, from what I've seen and heard, there aren't that many changes to the core gameplay seen in Cold Steel 3 for Cold Steel 4, at least when it comes to combat. Due to the nature of the story, field exercises and classes are frankly less important now, so that aspect of the game isn't going to feature in this entry. For those who played Cold Steel 2, it seems there will be a similar style of gameplay to that game as compared to Cold Steel 1 and 3, which were school-based. My suspicion is that the various allies are going to be divided around the country and they have to be found and brought into the fold, with no character being more important to that goal than Reen himself. Since I've generally avoided spoilers though, that's about all I can tell or guess for you right now on that front. The last tidbits of information when it comes to gameplay I have are that there are more Divine Knight fights, balancing done to make orders and breaking enemies less overpowered, more minigames, and improvements to the main Vantage Masters card game, which I really enjoyed in Cold Steel 3. No massive steps forward, just refinement of some of the systems introduced in Cold Steel 3, standard procedure for the series so far. Overall, it's a typical Trails game packed with content, and I can't wait to dive into every part of it. As for visuals, Cold Steel 3 really impressed me with its improvement of visuals from the first two Cold Steel games, especially for the in-game models and environments. I guess that's what you get when you move from games built for the PS3 to ones built for the PS4. Cold Steel 4 doesn't up the game's art and animation from 3, but I'm content seeing more of this style, and especially seeing old favorites being rendered in this style. Musically, from what I've heard, there are some suitably epic tracks, including the opening, and I expect another dynamic effort from Falcom's sound team. Lastly, voice acting remains a big part of the game with such a big cast and long story. And for the most part, they got everyone from the main cast back. However, certain actors were not able to reprise their role, likely due to the pandemic. The ones that I've seen confirmed as not coming back have been Laura, Chancellor Osborne, Lecter, and McBurn. However, they did get the original Sky actors to reprise their minimal roles in a more substantial way for this entry. I really can't wait to hear fully voiced dialogue from the Brights and many other characters we've never heard fully voiced before. Cold Steel 4 is not really a big step forward for the series in anything but story, although we certainly can't discount a leap forward when it comes to storytelling, given Trails' focus on telling a long-running, continent-spanning interconnected story, the likes of which have never been seen in video games. I think this huge conclusion to the arc, with its huge cast and slight refinement of the gameplay system, is more than suitable. The scenario forces the gameplay to be different in style, if not substance, in a way that should make it feel distinct from Cold Steel 3, and I am hopeful that the introduction of some old protagonists from previous arcs into Cold Steel will encourage players to check out the Sky or Crossbell games if they haven't already. We know the story is not over, since we've got Hajimari already having released in Japan, and some small details that we've gotten about the next arc likely set in Calvary. But this should be a huge conclusion to not just the Erebonian arc, but the western part of Zemuria's story. It might be messy, but I'm hoping for a bold and grand exit to Reinschwarzer, both Class 7s, and Erebonia as a whole. Let me know if you're excited for Cold Steel 4 and why in the comments. Give the video a like if you do, and subscribe for more Trails content and other video games if you have time to play those in between all these Trails games. Have a great day, and happy gaming!